nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. Miss Kathy, if you could take a roll, please.
Yes, Carter. Here. Howe.
Here.
Hayes.
Here. All righty. Okay, there's a lot to cover, tonight, and I've been having some, but before we get started on the actual agenda, maybe going ahead and hitting the conversation about Summit in Broad that we were talking about. So, Alan and I've met a couple times, and I've talked to BJ a little bit about, the Summit and Broad intersection. And I wanting to know where we stand on starting taking a look at that, getting that intersection fixed. And so after some discussion, in kind of, it would compare to the Mink Road project, essentially. It would probably be about $1.5 million. So I'm gonna summarize, and then you can fill in the holes, cause there's a lot to it. Essentially, in a couple of years, we are probably in good standing to get an
OPWC.
grant, the ABCD grant. So, what, there's too many acronyms. So, what we, talked about was going ahead, looking at getting the engineering into next year's budget on the CIP for the engineering of Summit and Broad, then moving forward, kind of doing a phase as if we were doing Mink Street. Pretty sure when the safety and capacity study comes back with our intersection, that one's gonna rank up there. So we really believe that if we already had that in the CIP, engineering done, and looked at the cost for right-of-ways, we would be in a good place to get a grant for it. Alan said he typically looks at about 60-40, which would be about 60% loan, 40% grant. But that's never a guarantee, but that's a hope. So that was like really high level conversations that we had. So
It's the highlights.
yeah. So is there anything else that you?
You know, this whole safety and capacity study, we commissioned that kind of to show what the priorities are. We think that Summit and Broad is gonna be number one or number two most likely. So go ahead and getting that set up, because in my mind it is the number one priority as far as intersections. Getting that set up for engineering next year for potential right-of-way in the budget, at least to some value in there, so we can get started on that. The following year would be the right-of-way and the OPWC grant, and then the following year construction. So it would be 2022 for construction.
And what did we say? We think it's like a 2-year.
Because of the OPWC cycle, you don't get their funds until July 1st. It would probably take 2 years to finish construction of that intersection.
So what are your guys' thoughts on that? BJ, did you?
I did, just a couple comments. You know, I agree that that's probably gonna be number one or number two as we look at Broad Street and just the traffic congestion that we see on Broad Street, making improvements to that intersection, increasing the stacking lanes there for the turn lanes, having dedicated turn signal heads, certainly is gonna help the traffic flow either west, east, north, or south at that intersection. The other thing we're gonna take a look at is, we know at some point in the future, don't know when it is, we're gonna have to have a discussion about widening Broad Street. So as we go into this, we'd be looking at doing these improvements to be able to accommodate that widening when it happens in the future. But I think it certainly is, as we talk about our intersections, it is necessary for the traffic on Broad Street to get this done.
Well, and we'd, it was said too that Mink is already in a position for, if we widened, that in the way it was constructed, that we wouldn't have to do anything additional to that intersection.
That's right.
So we would do Summit Broad to look similar to Mink, so we had the same style with our intersections throughout. And I mean, I like that idea, and I don't think it's anything fancy, it's not over the top.
It's
But it looks
proactive.
nice, it's clean, with the mast arms and those type of things. And then that led to a bigger conversation too about, you know, we're getting to the point now, what is our overall plan? Or do we have a plan? When do we start the discussion about widening Broad? And how do we look at that? So should we go ahead and start discussing, a 10-year plan for Broad Street in however many phases? And really just start looking at, instead of being behind the 8 ball when it comes to development or whatever else is coming in down Broad. We really need to, I feel an urgency to get that started now. With that is the discussion of Summit Road as well. We have a couple of roads that are, arteries to 161. And, you've got Mink, 310, and Summit essentially goes all the way down. And the capacity that road is gonna have to handle is going to be substantial. So that is going to be something that we have to look at in the near future. There's so many issues on that road. Even the discussion of fixing the intersection at Havens Corners and Summit. When we start talking about that, you're talking about when construction, if we ever get to that point, it's a 2-year probably fix, and it's gonna shut it down. And how are we gonna route the traffic in the meantime?
Right.
So these are things that I feel, we need to start highlighting and hitting and dealing with now.
I know this is down the road, but as we discuss that intersection, I'd love to see the discussion, someplace in there'd be a discussion of the gateway to the city, coming in from Columbus. So many people, pass through Tascala to go out to Granville or Newark or whatever, and to have that area have a classy presence, because it's not just leaving Columbus to Tascala. This is our message board to people that cross through our city. And sometimes Broad Street is the only thing they see of our city because they're not traveling through Old Town. So something, it doesn't have to be elaborate, but it can be something that makes a statement to what our mission is here. So I don't know if that, I completely support what you're saying. I love how you're always proactive. And that's one of your greatest strengths, is that you're always thinking on that side of the city. I don't travel that side of the city. I literally go downtown to Etna on a back road. So I know you see it, and so I think that I trust in you. I would just love to see something that welcomes people to the city, that is.
And it's a little bit of a
Classy.
deja vu moment. When I first got on council working with your husband, there
I
was
know what you're gonna say.
actually a
Discussion.
plan put together about the gateways to the city, and I still
Absolutely.
have that information.
We
but
talk
it-
about that often.
Yeah, it had some drawings and such, because the first thing you see if you're coming from Columbus is Taylor and Broad, and it's not pretty.
No.
I mean,
We have so many arteries like that in the city that could have their own flavor. From that end of the city, I know that that was one of Dan's, he loved the idea of creating and having each part of our city have its own identity, but yet continue to be one city. And we don't have to give up the identity of this side versus that side. So it all falls under the umbrella, but maybe that's part of it, and when that gets all torn up, that's a discussion to make that happen.
well, and I've always had hopes to see Summit Station, upgraded a little bit and revitalized. I think when I think of Summit Station, I think of, the Main Street project on a smaller level. But I really think that would do a great deal for that area of town.
Reynoldsburg did a nice job with, when they did it's been years, but when they put in their lights and their sidewalks and gave their corners some character, so it's possible.
It is possible, so those are things that, over the past week, Alan and I have been talking about and running it by BJ, and so really tonight what we're looking for is, a recommendation from the street committee to council to put the Summit and Broad engineering in the CIP for next year. Engineering and beginning of right-of-way acquisition. Look at the big words I remembered.
ABC.
So, if, somebody wants to make a motion to recommend to council that we put the, engineering and right-of-way acquisition for the Summit and Broad intersection in the CIP for next year.
I'll go ahead and make that motion.
So Mr. Powell made the motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
All right.
Carter,
Yes.
Powell,
Yes.
Hayes.
Yes.
Excellent. All right, now on to all the other big work that we have going on. I'm gonna let Alan hit the agenda so we can get rolling.
Okay, the first thing we got on there is the 2020 ramp. That was the last page that I handed you, had a list of potential streets. I've not had the opportunity, I have driven all the streets at the end of the year, last year, beginning of the year, this year, and analyzed them, but I have not had a chance to summarize that data. So I went through and marked everything here that was a more or less a priority one in the 0 to 2 year time frame, and came up with about 15 different streets. Of course, the last one just says downtown street. That's not a particular one, it's just in general try and catch one of the downtown streets for some kind of improvement each year as we're going through here. So I guess on that, just wanted to get those in front of you so you could start maybe considering which ones we think are the worst or need to be improved. All of them more or less do, but we'll have to pick some out of there, obviously, to determine. As far as the schedule on that, we did an RFQ last year and had Strand, GPD, and Hall all submitted on that. So for the 2018 ramp, Strand did the design. For 2019, GPD did the design. So for 2020, since we did that RFQ already, I was anticipating trying to go with Hall on that since we already did the RFQ 2 years ago. I just kind of round robin and hit all of them because they're all qualified. So that was my potential on that. And then for schedule, we'd probably start in beginning engineering in September. So we had a little time to think about all that, but figured we'd probably want to have a good idea of the streets, who we were going to go with, and then finally the budget. Last 2 years we've gone with $650,000. Of course, this year with the alternatives, we increased that to 800 and some thousand. Moving forward, I'm hoping we can do something similar. Maybe plan our base bid for somewhere around 700,000, and then include 2 or 3 alternates to, maybe add 100,000 per alternate, and be somewhere between 700,000 and $1 million, depending on what our budget looks like and which alternatives we want to go with based on bids.
So if you guys, look at that list and you have, personal experience on driving on any of them, or if you've had any feedback from residents or anything like that, that's always really helpful. Because some of those, they're small roads that people don't travel a great deal, but feedback is helpful.
Another thing to keep in mind, of course, we've kind of been reactive since I've been here. We're trying to just react to the problems that we have. I'd really love to make a switch to the proactive side of things, and a couple of these on the list they're in decent shape now, but if we do some minor things, maybe like a chip seal on Summit Road, we could save ourselves money in the long run by catching that before it gets to be a problem. So something else to consider while you're looking at it.
Absolutely.
All right.
2020 CIP. I probably should have printed this up since you could see it as well. I was kind of late in putting it together. Projects. Obviously, what Mel was just talking about with Summit and Broad. So our top priority intersection would be that engineering right away. 2020 ramp construction. Pataskala Safe Travel Plan Phase 3, which is actually another item lower on the list, so I'll come back to that. Taylor Road drainage. That's another item that's a little lower on the list that I'll come back to. And then Headley's Mill culvert lining, we'd already built that into the CIP last year to do that next year. We replaced a lot of the smaller culverts, There's 2 larger culverts that we think if we could probably just line those. Next year might be a good opportunity to do that. Did have some maintenance items as well. There are, probably include at least 1, if not 2, larger diameter culverts. The past couple of years, we've budgeted $50,000 per. Those have actually been coming in between $20,000 and $30,000. So maybe we can fit 2 in for $50,000 to $60,000. Still put roughly that same budget in there. Bridge maintenance. I've recently had Stone Engineering do a bridge. So every year ODOT does a bridge inspection, but they just tell us kind of metrics of it. They don't give us any recommendations for maintenance or improvements. So this study that Stone did took that to the next step and given us maintenance recommendations. I have the study on my desk. I haven't had an opportunity to look at it yet, but I anticipate having some bridge maintenance recommendations over the next 5 years to help maintain those bridges and such. So anticipate a line item for that. And then signal upgrades, which is one that's been in there for a few years. As far as equipment, we did have built in a single axle dump truck for next year, which I've got the proposal sitting on my desk, haven't looked at those yet. Replace an asphalt roller, replace a skid steer, and then we'd also talked about mowing and how that works out with getting grass on the streets and the potential for a new mower that would blow everything to the side or keep it off the streets. So I put that in there as a question mark as well. We're gonna try and look at getting a brand new mower. Not a replacement one, but just one to add to the fleet and still use the pull behind for areas that make sense to use that when they're off of the street.
And wasn't there a side discussion about staff?
Yes, I didn't put that in the CIP. I put that further down on the list. That was a little
Okay.
bit more involved, but yes. I guess that's a good idea to put that in there now, yeah. And looking to try and add staff next year. I'll go ahead and just talk about that. So ideally, right now we have 8 personnel in the department besides me. So the street superintendent and then 7 crew members basically. Some of the problems we have with that are when we break up into 2 or 3 different crews, we get the scenario where it's not, you're not my boss, and trying to decide how something's going to get done causes a little problems at times. There's also really no path for career upward mobility. So what I'm looking at trying to do is add 1 full-time person, but then so right now we have 1 superintendent, 7 crew members, have 1 superintendent, 2 crew leaders, and then 6 crew members. That way we could split up into different crews and have that leadership person there that's kind of running jobs. Also gives a little bit of path for upward mobility for guys that are doing better. And then we also looked at the potential of, or we talked about the potential of adding some seasonal employees to the public service department. The number I threw in there was 2. That's negotiable. That would help us out with mowing specifically. Like this year we got behind on mowing just because of the weather and availability of mowers and people. But help out with mowing. More limited tasks, easier tasks like maintenance of traffic and flagging and things like that. So a couple seasonal employees would really help us out in the summer. I know this year we've got a lot of little drainage projects and paving projects, and we're just about booked up for what we can take on this year. And of course, the calls don't stop coming. So that would be a big help to the department.
Do you have any
And
feedback on that?
sorry.
I want to see if, I know that in the past, adding staff to departments is it's a big discussion, and it tends to get heavily vetted before we send that on to, as a recommendation to council. So if you guys have any questions, or if you think there's any additional information, I know that when I was on the development committee and Scott added staff, he went through quite the exercise to show how that would help. I think this is a little bit of a different scenario, based on the departments, it's, but, so if there was anything that additional that you would want to know, or think would be helpful before we present that to council. So Alan can be prepared for those questions, and we're prepared to give a thorough recommendation when that time comes.
And if I can jump in there, seeing, how that's gone for Jamie and for Scott, I've started to prepare that. It's actually in the handout, but I was preparing for that later. It's a spreadsheet that we started just by task, personnel required, duration. It's in its infancy right now. Basically, Jason gave me a list and we put it in a spreadsheet. I'm planning to add to that, and would certainly welcome any input on how that looks and things we need to add to that to show the need.
When do you think that you'll be ready to share that with the committee? So we can start giving you some feedback, and then it's ready for when we're
So
making budget suggestions?
it's in the packet that I.
It's in this packet?
Yeah, that I gave you, so that, it's in its infancy, but it's in there, it's the second to last, I believe.
Oh, I see, okay.
Yeah. I haven't really done much with it yet, other than get it typed up and put in a spreadsheet. I'm planning to total that out in different ways and show, what that looks like in actual man hours that we're using, and show there's kind of a deficit in what we can do because we just don't have enough guys, but I haven't had the time to map that out yet.
I think we should be able to give you some more feedback at the next meeting, after we look through that. Are you guys agree
Absolutely.
on some suggestions about questions that you would have,
Yeah.
that make, from a layperson standpoint, so.
I know I've had a lot of emails from downtown residents asking about high grass on city property, so when you said that, made sense, so I get it. Is that what you're looking for?
Yeah.
Or like support or questions?
Yeah.
Okay, got it.
Well, and then, just if you were asking Alan to justify the need for these people, what supports would he need to give for that? Whether it's a percentage of breakdown in time on what they do on each project, or how, the crews break up daily, how
Is
they
there enough
prioritize their
manpower
work.
when they do break up, things like that?
Correct.
Got it.
Well, I think from also, you mentioned now, it's kind of like when the crew split up, there's kind of too many cooks in the kitchen. So when you
Which
have
is-
the 1 man for each crew, and then I think that just make things run smoother. Shoot,
Yep.
any part,
Sounds good.
be very.
It does a lot for morale too when you have the potential for upward mobility,
Yeah,
when there's
absolutely.
that goal, so,
Right.
okay.
Okay, so that was everything for the CIP specifically, unless we had any questions on that from Oak Meadow East. Okay, so our Oak Meadow Drive project, we did have a pre-construction meeting last week. That went really well. We knew coming in that our contractor had some bad reviews. I pretty much point blank said, hey guys, we had some bad reviews, what's up with that? And they said, hey, we include everybody on there, we don't try and hide them. And two, we know we had some issues, and we think we know what those are, and we're gonna work on those. And we have a plan for that. So I said, that sounds great. We told them it was a high visibility, high priority project, and we really need to make sure this goes well with everything that's going on out there. So they seem to be very responsive and okay with that. So we had a really good pre-con. Their schedule, we're doing shop drawings now for the structures for the storm water. As soon as those structures are available, they will start. So they are ready as soon as they get those. So we're trying to run that through the process quickly to get those approved and get those fabricated.
General time estimate on that?
They don't normally use this company that they're using for the structures because the other one was so backed up. They said they've been getting mediocre response out of them, so they're hoping this month.
Okay.
And sometime in July, if they can get it in the next 2 weeks, they will.
Okay.
So they can get out there and get started, because I think they'll be done by the end of October, which is
Okay.
more or less what we expected. As long as they're in there and, can pave before the, temperatures get bad, they get in good
Right.
shape.
We're still gonna have someone dedicated to watching over them.
100%. And then, the last thing on that's the budget, specifically the sidewalks. Since we're looking to add the sidewalks, at the next meeting, I anticipate having a resolution, to add that additional budget to the project. And I'll be working with Jamie for a supplemental, for that additional money for the sidewalks. And that's everything I had for Oak Meadow Drive. So the Pataskala Safe Travel Plan Phase 3, this is continuing the Safe Travel Plan. This phase would be the intersection, the eastern intersection of Broad and Summit, or not Broad and Summit, sorry, got that on my mind. Broad and 310, with Township Road right next to Buster's, getting pedestrian facilities across the south leg, so Township Road, and the east leg on 310, getting pedestrian facilities all across there. I did not get separate proposals on this, at least at this time. Hall has helped us scope the project. They've been involved in the whole project. They understand our ideas and how we're going about this project, so I did get a proposal for them. I had budgeted $30,000 for that, and their proposal came in at $21,000. So I thought that looked good. I guess we can discuss if we want to move forward as such.
I personally, I think since they've worked with us on the other phases of the project, they're under budget, I'm okay with that. Is that
Absolutely.
sticking with Hull?
Yeah.
Yep.
So I would anticipate going with a resolution for next council meeting for that then. I don't think we need anything else from the committee on that then. So, come with you, BJ.
No, I think, hearing that feedback, we'll prepare a resolution for the July 15th meeting and, go from there.
And one more, real quick, what's the scope on that timeframe wise? Completion?
Engineering would be done this year, bidding, looking to probably try and bid at the end of this year, beginning of next year. We've been trying to get the bidding done earlier and earlier, but with as many projects as we've got going on, I've had a hard time keeping that schedule. Next is the Taylor Road Drainage Project. So Taylor Road Drainage Project is flooding at the intersection of Taylor and Berry, and then south down Taylor Road, to, I call it the double barrel. There's two culverts that cross Taylor Road and a ditch line that heads to the west. I've initially scoped that for $15,000 for engineering this year and $150,000 for construction next year. What I realized going through that, I got one proposal from Strand. Their proposal was around $40,000, and the reasoning for that is their utilities. There's a lot of utilities out there, water on one side, sanitary on the other side, and gas is on one side or the other. So it's not going to be as simple as I thought it was with just replacing the drainage that's out there. There's going to be a little bit more to it. So I went ahead and got 3 proposals since it was a little bit more than I was expecting for certain, and American Structure Point came in right around $28,000. I do need to talk to them to make sure that they understand the full scope of the project and have everything in there that they needed, because theirs was just a little bit different than the other two, a little bit less than the other two. But provided that they do have a full understanding of the project, I'm probably looking to move forward with them. The good news on that is, even though I only budgeted $15,000 and it came in almost double that, we've had savings on other projects in engineering where the budget can absorb that additional cost. And then as far as next year for the CIP, it's sitting at 150, have to probably close to 250 to 300,000, almost double that, which we can look at in budgeting as well. But that's the highest priority on the drainage projects as we sit right now. We're good on that one. We'll move into some of the other drainage issues. So updates on that. Monarch Drive, that is where, I can't remember the name of that subdivision off the top of my head. Glenbrook, I believe. There's 2 retention basins. The one was causing the other to flood the roadway. And what we've done to kind of see how it's gonna operate. We took a sign and we blocked half of the pipe. And that has actually functioned really well, and it's simulating what we're gonna do with a permanent structure. The permanent structure would have phased or staged outlets to prevent the roadway from flooding, use some of the storage in the first pond. So we're confident in that. Paul has done some exhibits on that. We looked at those this past Thursday. There needs some tweaks and a little bit of ads, but we anticipate within the next 2 to 3 weeks having those wrapped up, and then getting 3 to 5 contractors to meet us out on site and run through it, see if they have any questions, and get proposals to get that outlet structure installed. I put Halloon Lane on here. At the time, there was the potential, Bobby Carr, local farmer, if you're not familiar, I was doing some work in the area of Halloon Lane, and there's the potential to maybe partner with him and have him install some storm sewer in that area. Once we get to looking at it a little bit more, we don't have any easements, it's all on private property, and we wouldn't be able to move fast enough to meet his schedule to get anything done. But that did spark a little bit more conversation that Mel and I had, not only about Halloon Lane, but also the Blanche Edition. Both of those are between, Blanche Edition scoped around 500,000 to 600,000, and Halloon Lane is scoped around $1 million, both of which price tags are maybe hard to swallow. So we talked about trying to break those up into more manageable, more palatable pieces, and include maybe like $150,000 line item in the budget for the next few years until we take care of both of them. And that way we're starting to tackle smaller pieces of them, so it's not quite the sticker shock.
Are you guys, do you have any other questions on that one?
Okay, I didn't have anything else specifically under drainage issues, other than the project, so I didn't know if there's any other thing that we needed to talk about now, or otherwise I'll move on to the project updates.
I didn't have any other, I haven't had any other complaints about drainage as of late, outside of the regulars.
Okay, I guess I will mention that, we do have a number of minor drainage issues that I haven't been reporting on. We've been tackling those as they come up and trying to deal with those. We've accomplished a number of them, and we've got a number yet on the agenda for here.
Excellent. Just, as a favor, if whoever's ward they're in, or if they seem, if maybe just a heads up to the council person. That way, if something goes sideways, they know what's going on with it. Like you had a, resident call about whatever, and you guys are doing X, Y, and Z. Even if it's just an informational only email, that way the council member isn't blindsided should they get a question, or, the person end up unhappy for whatever reason.
Okay, with the number of calls I get, I'll probably start out with just the ones where people seem a little bit more upset maybe.
It's fair. No, that's absolutely, yeah.
Okay, moving on to updates then, Mink Street Phase 2. Conflicting reports on when that's gonna be done. ODOT tells me mid to end of this month. Their project manager tells me he wants to have it open by the end of this week. So I'm not advertising the end of this week, I'm advertising mid to end of the month, but they are pushing to get that done because they've got other projects to get to. So with any luck, end of this week, if not, it'll be within the next couple.
And I haven't driven down it, but just on the either side of it, it looks completely clear and open.
So they're still doing operations, like rock hounding and things that it's a lot easier for them to work when there's not a bunch of traffic that helps get them out of there sooner. So I've been supportive of that and trying to get that done. They're really close.
It looks good. I mean, it
It's
looks
really starting to
really
take
nice,
shape.
so it'll be welcomed when that's open back up, for sure.
Next one's the Taylor Road Path. The punch list work is in progress on that. I know there's a few things. I didn't know if you had anything else specific.
Well, the only thing, I'd like to get a time frame. The questions I've had about the additional, guardrail's the only word that comes to mind right now, but you know what I mean.
So that one, we're not doing as part of the project, we're doing that outside of the project. We do have budget and other miscellaneous contractual services, we're working with, it's either MP Doria or, I can't remember the name of the other company that actually did that work. We do the same style of fence in those locations. I have not got a proposal for that yet.
Okay.
But, of course, depending on the price, we'll bring that back, but, within the next 2 months, I would think we'd be able to get that approved and installed.
Is there, is there anything we can do temporarily as a, safety measure? I don't know, like, maybe the little wire things with the,
We could maybe put like construction fence. and
something,
some,
yeah, just something to
and you're
highlight
talking
it
about right there at the creek.
at the creek on the sidewalk side,
Yes.
where there's this
Okay.
one on the other side, but there's nothing, and it is a short.
Okay, we could put up some barrels and some construction fence.
That would be helpful. That way, that's the one I've had, the most complaints about.
Okay.
And I did, when I was walking it, and Max was on his bike, it made me a little nervous. I made him get off and walk his bike by it, cause
Yeah.
that's all I needed, so.
I'm not sure what the design idea was there, maybe they just didn't catch it during design, but yeah, we're gonna add some riprap in that creek because it is right up next to that to kind of stabilize that bank, and then add the guardrail, well, it'll be fence, when it's done, but in the meantime, we'll add that
That'd be
construction.
perfect. And then the only other immediate thing is, there's a panel off of one of the electrical boxes, or one of the boxes along the, the sidewalk side.
Okay,
Probably closer to Taylor Glen. But it's pretty obvious, and in fact, it looks like when they were mowing, before you couldn't tell it was off unless you walked past it, cause it was on the back side. Well, somebody's actually taken the cover and kind of propped it up on the front side, so it's pretty obvious that the cover's sitting there now, so that, which would bring, curious people to check it out. So
Yeah.
if we could just, get that cover put back on there, that'd be fantastic.
okay, that's probably a private utility, so we'll have to work through them unfortunately, which could take a little extra time, but we'll
Okay.
start that ball rolling.
So, and if that's gonna take some time, again, maybe fence it off,
Okay,
just, I don't know what it goes to, but if somebody, lost all their cable for a couple weeks because somebody's ornery child decided to play with an open box.
I'm gonna put that on my drive
I
through.
think losing
list to look
cable
at
might be the
Wednesday.
least of the worries.
That seems to be the one that gets it right. That seems
Losing
to
the
be
kid
most-
playing in the box.
I think they might not hear so much if they did. They messed up their cable. But yeah. I was thinking about my ornery kid in particular, honestly, but
Okay.
Alrighty.
Next one is the traffic signals, intersection improvements, the timing plan, safety and capacity study. Really nothing new to report on those. Design is in progress on both of those. We're expecting timing plan to be implemented near the end of the summer. Safety and capacity study will probably be September by the time.
Okay.
Let's see, impact fees. And I know that's gonna be talked a little bit more tonight, at council. We've talked about internally at least with we did get a proposal from Burton Planning Services, for just under $10,000 to put that together for us. There'll obviously be some in-house work we've gotta do as far as the CIP and, budgeting and such, so we have accurate numbers for that. But what we've talked about is, planning and zoning department and the development committee, kind of quarterbacking that, with the public service department providing the financial support and backup for that. So that we do have some extra savings in the engineering budget for this year so that we can support that, with them taking the lead role on implementation.
Are Are you guys on board with that?
Yep.
I felt like,
Sounds good.
I was in full agreement, I feel like this street, load is kinda heavy, so it's a good way to go.
Next one is Pawhuska Safe Travel Plan Phase 1 and 2. That's of course the pet facilities across the south leg of 310. They are hoping to be out there next week. I was gonna try and call him today, but I did not get a chance to confirm that schedule. But within the next 2 weeks, they will begin that project. The only holdup that we know of is the controller and cabinet. It takes a while. There's a fair lead time on that, so they're gonna do all the work and get it ready, and then as soon as that comes in, they'll install that and do the switch over. So they'll probably get most of the work done, and there'll be a delay until they're able to come back and complete it. Engineering retainer, there's in the packet that I gave you, there's a list of the work, should be two-sided, that shows everything that Hall & Associates has worked on for us so far this year. Of course, we did increase the budget for the engineering retainer this year. Last couple of years have been 90,000, and we were pushing that envelope. This year, I think we've increased it to 120. But it's actually been kind of a light year, and halfway through, we're only at $35,000 on the engineering retainer. So that's looking pretty good so far. I'm sure we can come up with things for Hall to do if we need to, but that savings is obviously a good thing.
Wow, that's excellent.
Finally, the 2019 ramp, that is planned to start at the end of July, beginning of August. Once they get in here, that work shouldn't take long. Of course, we did give them the caveat that the chip seal does need to get done this calendar year for both last year and this year. We can't really afford to have that lapse again. So they understood that and don't think it'll be a problem, so we'll definitely stay on that. And we already talked about Public Service Department personnel. That was everything that I had on the agenda specifically.
I'll just give a quick update on Main Street and the easement. Me and Tim and Tommy Lee attended. Suzanne was made aware it was had a conflict. Met with the owner of the Ivory Barn and a representative from AEP on Friday. Good meeting. I am anticipating and I'm hopeful that sometime this week AEP will have a signed easement from the Ivory Barn folks. They seemed receptive to it. We talked, able to answer the questions they had. They're excited that the poles in front of their business are gonna be coming out. They had some questions about, the side of their building, when it would be done, how it would be done. But I am very hopeful that, the result of that meeting will be having a signed easement and, be ready to go with that project. AEP, they did say that, they don't believe that they'll be able to get in there and get it finished before the street fair, so it would be after the street fair. But I felt very comfortable, after that meeting with feedback we'd received from the Ivory Barn folks and the questions that were able to be answered.
That's the last step in it, right?
That's it.
BJ, did you say that AEP is gonna do that installation as well?
Correct. They're gonna do the installation. The only thing we're gonna have to pay for, which, different than they said before, is the actual connections to the existing meter boxes.
Okay, so I think we have in the budget to do the work ourselves
We
and the
do.
connection, so there should be some savings, at least on the end of the day with
It's-
silver lining.
Yeah, but let's
Uh-oh, okay,
not make that,
fair enough,
let's wait till they're done with the work before we
fair enough.
talk about that. Thank you.
Okay. Should we go ahead and, do you guys have anything else that streets needs to cover that, should we go ahead and talk about getting another street committee meeting on the books since there's so many things going on right now and things that we need to have prepared for budget talks? I know next meeting, there's a development committee meeting, and I know the time is fluctuating on that a little bit,
It is.
Make it earlier than what's already scheduled, so,
like maybe 6
yeah.
instead of 6:30? Is that enough time for that one? Is there
I think-
anything else on before next meeting, Kathy?
Just this, development committee, and we don't have a firm time on that yet.
Okay. Do we need a street committee again, Alan, next meeting, or do you wanna wait one more?
Well, I was trying to balance that in my mind, cause if we wait one more, that's August 5th, cause there's actually, we have a gap there, or 2 weeks because of the 5-week month of July.
Right,
But by the 15th, I'd have a hard time getting ready. If there's a possibility of maybe the 22nd or the 29th, which would be off council nights, just to give me a little extra time, those would work well for me, but I'll leave that up to you guys. I could do that.
I could do that. Are you okay with that, Suzanne?
Evenings, yeah.
So that would be, you wanna say the 29th,
Yeah.
5 o'clock?
Works well for me.
July 29th at 5.
Yes, ma'am. Got it. Alright. There's nothing else? Take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Kathy?
Carter,
Yes.
Powell,
Yes.
Hayes.
Yes.
Meeting adjourned.
It's a big agenda to get done.
We got development then?
Get done.
No.
It's crank
Ag.
6.
Ag at 6.
I was worried.